Good evening and welcome to the Newshour Agenda. Viewers, are we staring at the beginning of a new trade war? Or is this just a trade reset? We ask you this today as the US President Donald Trump imposed a 27% tariff on Indian goods. This, remember, is part of President Trump's global tariff regime aimed at correcting what he calls unfair trade practices. The Modi government says it is carefully examining the implications of the various measures made by the US President. It's engaged with all stakeholders, including Indian industry and exporters, taking feedback of their assessment of the tariffs and assessing the situation. It's also studying the opportunities that may arise due to this new development. Now, while making the tariff announcement, Donald Trump held up a chart in the Rose Garden and said something about a very, very tough India and his dear friend Prime Minister Modi. Listen in.
Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46% and much higher for certain items like cars, little items like cars. 46%, we're charging them 24%. India, very, very tough, very, very tough. The Prime Minister just left, and he's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%. You have to understand, we charge them almost nothing for years and years and decades, and it was only 7 years ago when I came in, we started with China charge. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China in tariffs. And they understood, honestly. President Xi understood. He said, look, I understand. And the other countries, and they all understand. We're going to have to go through a little tough love, maybe. But they all understand. They're ripping us off, and they understood it.
It's also important to note that the US executive order has a built-in provision. If a country addresses US trade concerns, the Trump administration may review or reduce the tariff. Section 4 of the executive order reads, and I quote verbatim, should any trading partner take significant steps to remedy non-reciprocal trade arrangements and align sufficiently with the United States on economic and national security matters, I may further modify the HTSUS to decrease or limit in scope the duties imposed under this order. But the opposition, led by Congress and leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi, are seeing gloom and doom, breaking up Trump administration's 27% tariff. Rahul Gandhi said that the government must clear its stand on its future course of action. Listen in.
Foreign policy is about managing the external countries. You have given China 44,000 square kilometers of land. On the other side, our ally suddenly decides to impose tariffs on us, 26%, which is going to completely devastate our economy. Our auto industry, our pharmaceutical industry, they're all on the line. Agriculture. But we would like an answer from the government of India. What are you doing about our land? And what are you going to do? What are you going to do about this tariff that our ally has imposed on us?
But what does this really mean in terms of India? What are the factors at play over here? When it comes to steel and auto parts, already they are facing a 25% tariff, which essentially means that Indian goods, whether we're talking about steel, whether we're talking about auto parts and other goods such as aluminum, they're already under the 25% tariff. That's the old policy, is what Trump's team calls a pre-existing adjustment. The second factor is items under pharma, semiconductors, which have been exempt from tariffs thus far. Now, these are some of the critical sectors which are completely exempt from the new tariff, which includes, of course, semiconductors, copper, energy products, and pharma. And this matters because these are among India's most valuable and consistent export performers to the United States. Factor 3, that India is not worst hit by the American tariffs. There are countries which have much higher tariffs. Of course, there are countries that are lower, but India is not among the worst hit, globally speaking, when it comes to American tariffs. This is a strategic angle. Whether India's still better placed than most of its competitors. China, for instance, has been slapped with a 54% tariff. Vietnam has been slapped with 46%, Bangladesh with 37%, Thailand with 36% as compared to India's 27%. The fourth factor that we're talking about are that more tariffs imposed on China, Vietnam, Bangladesh that we were just discussing. In fact, what does it mean in terms of a competitive advantage, relatively speaking, as far as India is concerned, especially in categories like electronics, garments, and value-added manufacturing. Fifth factor that we're talking about, trade channels between India and US are now open. Now, the question over here is about the government calling this situation a mixed bag, not a setback. Commerce Ministry is analyzing the sector-by-sector impact, but there's no talk of a retaliation at the moment at least. Instead, India is working behind the scenes to try and resolve all the situation that exists at the moment. Remember that we're already engaging with the United States and expect by fall to have a trade agreement there. And the two leaders, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, have spoken about $500 billion in trade by 2030. Now, government officials say the impact across sectors is being mapped. Industries like gems and jewelry, processed foods, auto parts, and seafood are being monitored for disruptions. However, some relief has already come in the form of exemptions, with pharmaceuticals and semiconductors not subject to tariffs, as we've been discussing. But what about the impact of Trump's reciprocal tariffs on other countries? Let's quickly take a look. As India, of course, was at 27%, China is at 34% that we're talking about. Let's also quickly take you through other countries. Thailand at 36% as compared to India's 27%. There's Vietnam at 32% as well, Indonesia at 32%, Cambodia at 49%, Bangladesh at 37%, Sri Lanka is at 44% is what we understand. Let's quickly take this across to our guests and debate what we can expect in coming days, what's going to be the impact of the tariffs in India as well as globally.
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Let's take this across to our guest. Joining us is Kanwal Sibal, ex-Foreign Secretary. We have Ajay Bagga, who's a market expert, joining us. Suhail Seth is with us. He's a columnist. Vibhuti Jha is an ex-Republican candidate for the New York Assembly. We have Pastor Mark Burns, Trump's spiritual advisor, also joining us. Kanwal Sibal, a very interesting response that came in from the Commerce Ministry today, saying that it's a mixed bag. They're going to analyze the sectoral impact. And India certainly is not rushing into any rhetoric like we saw earlier in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, where India, also announced some kind of retaliatory tariffs. That's not what's happening on ground at the moment. India is being very, very cautious and treading very carefully to ensure that things do not go out of hand. How are you reading what has taken place as far as the US tariffs that have been imposed?
I think the government is acting very maturely. There's no need to rush into anything. We have to wait and watch how all this pans out. After all, we have been engaging the American side from the time our Prime Minister went to the United States, and Piyush Goyal went there subsequently, and their team came here. We are discussing a multi-sector trade agreement. We've already indicated that we will reduce tariffs, but we want this to be done as part of a bilateral multi-sector trade agreement, which alone would protect us from the MFN clause. Otherwise, if we make unilateral concessions within the WTO format, then China, I suppose, can gain the most from it. Number one. Number two, there's no need to sort of tear our hair and everything about this as if we have been singled out. Frankly, all the allies of the United States have been singled out. Even Britain, Australia, the Australian Prime Minister said we impose no tariffs on the United States. So why have they imposed 10% tariffs on us? The EU has been also targeted. So it's not that, in fact, if you look at the number of countries that have been targeted, it's virtually all the countries in the world, even those which don't have any trade with the United States. Right. And then you mentioned already, you gave a list of the neighboring countries who have been imposed, on whom the US has imposed tariffs, which are much larger than the tariffs imposed on us. That's the second point. Right. Third is that we are not the only one who will try to find a way out and deal with the Americans and see if they can make some adjustments. As you read out one of the articles of this executive order, that if countries are responsive, then the United States will see if they can reduce tariffs.
Let me take that question, sir. That's a very important point.
All those countries will make an effort to do this. Yes. India will not be alone. Yes. So this is going to play out for a long time, because what Trump has done is he has wrecked the current international economic order.
Well,
And
it's a
along
huge
with that,
disruption.
the international order as such, the rules-based order as such, the repercussions will be very severe.
Yeah, so please stay on with us. In fact, it's a huge disruption as far as global trade is concerned. And I want to bring in Vibhuti Jha on that. Vibhuti Jha, the question that many are asking at this point of time is that, is this just, a sort of a rude shock that Trump wants to give everyone, and then also keep the clause where there's room for negotiation so that Trump can do his own deal making, whether in national security and national interest, or whether it comes to other trade concerns. Is that what we're looking at this point of time? Because India and US already have a target of a 500 billion trade by the end of 5 years, and they're hoping that by fall there will be that trade agreement. How will we achieve that if there are going to be such huge tariffs which could potentially bring down the level of trade?
Thank you, Madhav, for having me here. It is, remember one thing, I think Trump's gift to the international diplomatic arena has been the use of word reciprocal tariff. I mean, I have been always talking about that we have to demand reciprocity with who we deal with. This is the first time you have heard the word reciprocal tariff. And as Kamalji pointed out, that he's shaking up the entire global order. And this is something which is called the extraordinary times, extraordinary measures. US is in a tough bind. If any one of us had this debt to income ratio, nobody would write us a penny. But US has the ability to print the notes and get away with it. That ability is also shrinking for a variety of reasons. I need not dwell upon that. But India, as you rightly say, it's not a gloom and doom scenario for Bharat, for the simple reason that we are only 2.2% of our GDP goes as an export to US. And pharmaceutical has been excluded and chip has been excluded from there. So we have to right now boost the trade between India and the US. Vietnam, Taiwan, they have significant amount of higher tariff on this. There is other element which is also plays out in this, is that what kind of goods and services are going to be under tariff. Tariff is always used as a protection for domestic industry and preventing dumping on yourself. So this is the way the tool is being negotiated right now. I have always maintained that tariff is a tool that Mr. Trump is using as the next level of negotiation, and he's open to that.
Right.
As you sow, so you reap kind of a scenario.
Yeah.
You charge me, I'll charge you. You don't charge me, I'm not charging you.
Well, there's no free
So the
lunch
question
certainly in
here
either diplomacy or trade, internationally speaking, sir. And let me bring in Sohail Seth on that. Sohail Seth, the point is this, that there are certain sectors where India has a significant amount of exports that haven't been hit by this 27% tariff, but there are sectors where this massive tariff will impact. Many are viewing this also as an opportunity for us and our industry, which has enjoyed the benefits of protectionism despite liberalization for decades, to now get more competitive globally and also diversify. Why just depend on the US market? There are other countries and other markets that perhaps they can expand to. Do you see this as an opportunity as well?
Absolutely. A. B. Donald Trump is the American president. He's not the president or the prime minister of India. He has to bat for America. It's another matter that all his economic policies will actually not be Liberation Day relevant. They'll be Ruination Day relevant. He's imposing 19th century logic on the 21st century. Any country which goes into this kind of a tariff regime first brings disaster upon its own citizens. So you will see the following. A, you will see recession. B, you will see a downturn in spending. C, you'll be upsetting your allies, as Kamal also rightly said. But the most important thing is it is time for us also to stop being namby-pambies. Oh, what will happen to us? What will happen to us? The point is, in all these years of being this so-called soft power geniuses and superpowers, have we developed one Indian consumer brand that is known across the world? The answer is no. We don't have a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi or a Google or a Yahoo. So it's time we stopped being squeamish about our own capabilities. I think Narendra Modi has done a remarkable job by talking about Startup India, by talking about Make in India. It's time we actually put our shoulders to the wheel. The tariff regime is, see, remember one thing about Donald Trump. His hallmark and his birthmark is inconsistency. So if you think he'll be consistent in anything he does or says, remember he will not. That in itself is our straws of hope. So if you think he's going to pursue with a particular tariff regime, he won't. Vibhuti rightly talked about reciprocity. He will use reciprocity to actually reward people by saying that, look, this country is helping me, I'm rewarding them, but he'll be doing side deals. He's essentially a deal maker. The last president of the United States, I think, I can't remember the name, Fitzpatrick, or whatever it was, he was the one who actually created a huge tariff regime and it destroyed America. But we don't want America to be destroyed. If you look at our trade deficit, I think our trade deficit is about 26 or 36 billion dollars. So, you know, my worry is not about what will happen to India. My worry is this is a great opportunity for India and Indian manufacturing, Indian industry to reinvent itself.
Absolutely.
From being crybaby, let's become global players in certain areas where we actually own brands, because that is where additional value will accrue.
Absolutely. And in fact, there's no reason Indian companies can't do it. Many of them have been successful in the past. But Pastor Mark Burns, I want you to come in on what Sohail said that it is perhaps an idea of the last century that is being implemented by President Trump. It has implications for not just countries such as India and, of course, Southeast Asia and, of course, the European countries, etc., but also for the United States itself, whose own citizens might end up bearing the brunt of higher prices, and also as far as global trade is concerned. Do you agree with him, Pastor Burns?
Well, you know, they said that President Trump was going to do this in 2020 and that the American people was going to suffer for it. But you, of course, see, during his first term, we had the greatest economic revival in U.S. history on his presidency. But listen, this is the day of liberation for American citizens. And I'm glad what my colleague said on this, that he stated was that President Trump is the president of the United States of America, not the president of the whole entire world. What he's going to do, it's designed to benefit the citizens of the United States of America, just like Prime Minister Modi's goal is to benefit the citizens of India. But the reality of it is this: in 2023, we have about a U.S.-Indian trade about $190 billion between our two countries, and U.S. exports about $70 billion to India, and the India exports about 120 billion. I'm sorry, U.S. exports about 120 billion to U.S. Right, and U.S. exports to India about 70 billion. So that's about a $50 billion trade deficit in favor of India, and that's just one nation. That's happening to us all over the world, and President Trump says enough is enough. If America is going to continue to take its place as a superpower around the world, we have to first make sure that our home base and our home citizens are taken care of, and that's what he's doing. But there's a lot of advancements with India. Let me just say this quickly, and I like what the colleague just said. I mean, right now, our defense sector that we are doing with India is very powerful. Don't forget, President Trump and Prime Minister Modi have come up with Mission 500. The goal of that is that we trade more between our two nations, that we will reach $500 billion by the year 2030.
Will these tariffs be a hurdle, or will they help in that regard? That's the question over which the jury is still out. But yeah, I think Sohail Said wants to respond to you. Sohail.
Just very quickly, Pastor, with due reverence, no pun intended, there's an article in today's Financial Times, as also in the New York Times, which says that most auto dealers in America are up in arms. Because what is Trump going to do? He's going to destroy nearshoring. He's going to destroy offshoring manufacture. Prices are going to go up of the American consumer. So what you saw in Wisconsin, despite Elon Musk promising $25 million plus $100 for people to sign up, you're going to see a huge electoral issue there. I mean, with all due respect, I don't think it is our concern what happens to Trump. But it is certainly our concern, as Mr. Sybil rightly said, that if Donald Trump wrecks the world's economy, it is reflected in what you've seen today. The Dow has tanked. Global markets are tanking. Is that the America you want? And remember one thing, Donald Trump's first term, in spite of what he did, the economy worked well. So, you know, that's something that we need to park both historically and economically.
Okay. Before I get across to Pastor Burns, quick response from Ajay Bagga. Ajay Bagga, a lot of concerns about which way the markets are headed. They've been jittery for some time now ahead of this 2nd April announcement. Now that the announcements are made, you know, how long before things really settle down? Do you think they're going to get much worse before they get better?
No, I think for the Indian markets today, Madhav, it was a good day. We lost hardly 0.5%. The banks went up. So it was a day of relief because now you have established the parameters. It's between 27 and 10. The tariffs are not an end. Tariffs are a means to an end by Trump, and that our government recognizes. There is engagement at all levels. Some agreement will come through. There the markets are not too fussed up about that. $80 billion is what you're importing. You're a $4 trillion economy. As Mr. Jha mentioned, it's 2% of your GDP. The max hit that you will get, even with 26% tariff, is about 0.5% of GDP. That's the worst case scenario. It won't happen. It won't come to that. We'll probably lose 0.1. Companies specific might lose. Seafood and stuff cannot go at 26% margins. They don't have. The textile guys can manage. Automobile parts cannot do that. They have 8 to 12% margins. So they are wiped out if you do 26%. But that's true for the whole world.
Right.
Today, if you see Nike is down 14%, Lululemon is down 15%, Ralph Lauren is down 17%. They are making everything either in China or Vietnam with 50% tariffs.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. And I want Pastor Burns to come in on this because, Pastor Burns, it appears that the very companies that, President Trump is trying to sort of protect are the U.S. companies. Unfortunately, several of them manufacture abroad. And, for them to shift their manufacturing back to the country overnight, it's going to take a considerable amount of investment and time. And therefore, as Suhail mentioned, it could be the U.S. economy that gets hit the worst with such a move. Would you agree with him?
Well, let me say this again. President Trump has put a 25% tariff on auto parts. The sole purpose of that is the reality is 25% of the auto parts that are bought by or consumed by American citizens are only made in America. That's a problem. Only 25% of the car parts that are bought in America by Americans. It is, but that's why those rules are changing. That's why President Trump is making it American friendly to be made in America. Remember, our greatest enemy is China, not India. Our enemies are China, not enemy. Our enemy is China. China is the institution that we need to be focusing on. It is China that is causing these economic issues, not President Trump. President Trump is saying we need to increase production in our own home in the United States of America. Just like India is saying we need to have more manufacturing in India. We need to combine our manufacturing efforts. Quit treating like Donald Trump is the president of the entire world and realize that this is about America.
Pastor Burns, can I share a small anecdote with you? Yeah, I'm just coming to you. Just a minute, Suhail, and also want to go across to Mr. Sibal on this. But I was actually in the Oval Office when President Trump and Prime Minister Modi met a few weeks ago. And when a direct question about how India and US will together defeat China, President Trump was unequivocal. He said, we are not here to defeat anybody. So, that whole question or that whole common interest when it comes to national security and trade, President Trump's taken a very different position at different points of time.
Not defeat them, but to outmaneuver them. Let me use the words of Mr. Gandhi. Not to defeat them, but to outmaneuver them. We want to outmaneuver them. It is India that is in danger with China right across the way. It is the United States of America if we don't stop China. And the president is doing just that with these tariffs.
Okay, fair enough. That's a reasonable and a valuable argument. But will the U.S. actually stick to what is being claimed? That's a big question, Mr. Sibal.
Absolutely.
Because there have been different positions. I mean, to put it diplomatically and mildly, there have been very different positions that have been taken at different points of time, and we're just talking about the last 6 months. Mr. Sibal.
A couple of things. One, it is true that China is the major target of Trump. And the fact that such high tariffs have been imposed on Vietnam and on Cambodia, in other words, they are trying to impose very high tariffs to disturb the supply chains that companies have built by moving out of China into neighboring countries in Southeast Asia. So to that extent, yes. But on the other hand, he's imposing tariffs also on the European Union and on its allies. In fact, his biggest 5 partners in the world are Japan and Canada and the EU and the UK. And he's imposed tariffs on all of them. Canada and Mexico were imposed earlier, but he's imposed on UK, EU, and Japan. They are They are the allies of the United States. The China factor is not there. He's actually changing the entire global rules. He's moving out of multilateralism altogether. He wants a new system by which America will deal bilaterally with each country and use its economic and financial power and its market size to force other countries to yield to his demands. This is going to have serious repercussions down the line on a multilateral trading order, and everybody is going to suffer. So I don't know what the calculations of the American side is by doing all this unilaterally. Earlier they had weaponized finance. Now they are weaponizing trade. And this is not the international community and the developing countries in general. Look, there was always in the WTO the whole concept of special and differential treatment for the developing countries. And some leeway, some space given to the developing countries to be able to protect their economy, develop their economies. Otherwise, they'll be overwhelmed by the strong economies.
Right.
Now, he has disrupted all that.
Right.
And it's going to have long-term repercussions. But the final point is, and I'll come back to what I said, India need not panic because everybody is in the same boat. In some ways, we are not that
badly hurt. Yes.
Worse place than the others. And we can negotiate with the Americans. But the overall system now is going to be very, very difficult for any country to. Now, if
There are choppy waters.
And China and others actually retaliate as they intend to do, as they must do, in order to safeguard their image and their role as global powers.
Absolutely. And Vibhuti-ja, that's the question. You know, at the end of the day, if China and other countries decide to retaliate, you know, this could just escalate the situation into a far worse situation than we currently are in. And of course, as Suhail was mentioning, what happens to global trade, what happens to the economy, globally speaking, these are some very, very real concerns.
It is indeed. So let me put it this way to you. Since we all agree that Donald Trump is the president of the United States of America, and he's trying to fix things, what's wrong in America. And what is happening right now, the one word that we don't hear from many people, which as a student of economics and a banking, international banking, you know, I would say that the United States is suffering from, forget the physical obesity problem on the health side, we are suffering from a huge financial obesity. That's the word I use. And he is trying to get into what is known as an extreme fat loss program. When you get into an extreme fat loss program, then it creates problem for several others as well, because I'm no longer consuming what I did earlier on. I'm giving a very simple analogy. And this is what is important for all of us to recognize, that yes, as the saying goes, the jungle shakes when the elephant walks, right? So that's what it is happening. United States is the biggest animal on the planet Earth when it comes to export, largest consumer nation in the world. And so we are looking at a scenario. We no longer can afford to print our currency through our problems. That's what is. Trump has realized that.
Right.
Whether others have realized it or not,
Suhail, it's not the world's biggest animal on an extreme fat loss program. Is that not how you see it?
Since Vibhuti has mentioned elephant, Trump's dilemma is as such. When you go to bed with an elephant, you never know when it rolls over and the pleasure turns into pain. The problem is we have to see who will be pained the most, Americans or people outside. That's an issue that Trump will have to deal with. And since the pastor is a spiritual advisor, only God can save America in its current isolation from the rest of the world, both economically and diplomatically.
Right. It's very baffling to me to where we just don't quite understand it. It says reciprocal. I mean, simply what you charge us, we charge you. That's that simple. What we charge you, you charge us. It's reciprocal.
All right. Pastor Burns. Okay, Ajay, quick last one, 30 seconds.
One last point.
Madhav, we did the calculation. The average, weighted average of Indian tariffs on U.S. goods is 12%. The U.S. does 2.5%. So reciprocal should have been 10%. That was what we were expecting. Correct. The formula they have used is that the trade gap by the amount of imports. So that comes to roughly 53 for us, and they have divided it by 2, made it 26. Same for China. That is the simple 6th grade maths that has been used back of the envelope. Nobody should get fooled. This is a maximalist position for negotiating. If you had given 10, we would have asked for 5. Now you've given 27. we will be happy with 10. If we get 10, we will try to rework. But it doesn't make that big a difference, especially for an economy of the size of India. $80 billion, 20 billion going off. Well, yes, it will create a lot of companies employment. But remember, today what is happening, GE Health Systems has plants in 20 countries around the world. They don't know what to do. All cars in US use 40% imported equipment. Today, Stellantis has laid off people in their Canadian and Mexico plants. Already, there are layoffs happening in the US because of this changing in...
Well, the repercussions, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, Ajay, but we're out of time on this debate. The repercussions are going to be felt globally. There would be aftershocks. How quickly can the countries sit down at the negotiating table and ensure that these tariffs are more realistic and workable? That's a big question. Kawal Sibal, Ajay Bagga, Suhail Seth, Vibhuti Jha, Pastor Mark Burns, thank you so much for joining us on this debate.